Right, so Israel's football fans, if we can charitably call them that, have it seems struck again. This time those attending the match between the national sides of Israel and France. And once more scenes of clashes, this time literally in the stadium, in what has been described by some sources as a lynching of French fans by Israelis, has come to pass. But equally, where authorities there again struggle with football fallout where Israel is involved, still politicians remain silent. Well, at least some. Others, notably in the Netherlands, having already had to deal with Israel's football fans already, are speaking out, are telling it like it is, and are not willing to put up with any more such nonsense from those refusing to condemn them. Of all of those seemingly remaining silent, who really shouldn't, after this second example of poor behaviour relating to Israeli football, are the football organisations themselves. Where exactly are UEFA? Where are FIFA? I thought they wanted to stamp out poor behaviour, but aside from that, by not suspending Israeli teams from international football, you're hardly condemning their actions in Gaza either, are you? If international governments won't impose sanctions, why can't some sporting leadership show some responsibility for it instead? So, Israel versus France, supposed to be a football match, might have turned into more of a boxing match. But this was the match last night at the Stade de France, and it was a pretty empty stadium, it has to be said. It's supposed to be an 80,000 seat stadium or something like that, and apparently it has never been so empty, just 20,000 seats filled from what I gather, as the French themselves mostly boycotted this match. Though not all of them. There had to be some there for the Israelis to actually pick on, of course. And there were other French people there as well, notably Emmanuel Macron himself, the French president, in attendance with his new Prime Minister Michel Barnier and other former French presidents besides Hollande and Sarkozy, who presumably bore witness to all of this aggression as well. But they haven't said a thing on the matter at time of writing, and shame on all of them for as long as that remains the case. Of course, there had to be some French spectators there, otherwise there wouldn't have been anybody to apparently lynch, would there? Not my words, but those of French political commentator Arnaud Bertrand, who shared a piece of footage of this large group of Israelis storming through the stands to attack a group of French spectators. And on that, Bertrand said, absolutely perfect illustration of what we enable with the way the media and the Western political class framed what happened in Amsterdam. There was a football match between Israel and France yesterday, and this happened at the beginning of the match. A horde of Israeli supporters openly lynched some French supporters in the stands. Macron himself was in attendance at the match to show his commitment to fighting anti-Semitism after Amsterdam. He made no public comment that I know of on these French supporters getting lynched in front of his eyes, and the police made no reported arrests. Had the reverse been the case, had this been some Israeli supporters getting lynched by a horde of French supporters, you can absolutely bet 100% that he and all the French media would have made a huge deal out of it. You cannot overstate the absurdism of it, because we've so gaslighted ourselves around anti-Semitism and so distorted the meaning of it. Western countries would literally rather let our own citizens get lynched on their own soil in front of the president's eyes than face accusations of being anti-Semitic in their own definition of the term. A damning statement, possibly one of the most damning statements with regards to anti-Semitism and the views thereon put upon us by our so-called leaders. And it's impossible to disagree with. And to just underline precisely how spineless the French authorities and the French president are on this matter that Bertrand raises, on the abuse of that term anti-Semitism, of running scared of accusations to the point French citizens can be attacked seemingly with impunity. Even the playing of the French national anthem saw the same boos and jeers that were seen in Amsterdam during that minute's silence for the victims of the Valencia floods in Spain. Israeli fans booed the French national anthem to the face of the French president. But where the police made no arrests in relation to the incidents in the stadium, they were less shy outside of it, where again their own people seemingly got targeted because as they left the stadium, they were escorted out by the police. To protect these Israeli fans instead of arresting them, protect them against all the peaceful protesters who boycotted the match but were assembled outside anyway to wave Palestinian flags. Even French TV were incredulous in their apparent sycophancy as they interviewed an Israeli fan after the match about how they found the atmosphere. Tell us how you experienced the game, BFM TV's host asked Alexandre, an Israeli guy literally wearing an IDF shirt to the match, and he called it magnificent. and beautiful in reference to the match itself, which ended 0-0. But when asked about the atmosphere in the stadium, given BFM TV had already caught this same guy on camera as part of that earlier lynching of French fans, so they already knew who he was and what he'd already partaken of in their country, on their soil, in their national football stadium, and yet still decided to interview him anyway. He said that atmosphere was also magnificent and beautiful. Perhaps his French is just a bit limited. But if BMF TV interviewed any of their own people, perhaps they'd give a somewhat different response. I dare say they would. I guess finding one might have been the hitch, since so many had boycotted it, and those who did attend, well, they might have ended up leaving needing medical attention for all we know. I don't suppose Macron would have passed comment by any chance. Another video clip shared by Redstream.net, however, spoke to a French chap outside the stadium, dressed in a keffiyeh, there as part of the protest, and he had plenty to say. He said, "For a year now, a genocide has been underway, and in France we have a brilliant idea. Let's play football with the genocide perpetrators." That French president, Sarkozy, Hollande and Macron, all three are here today in this stadium. It's deplorable, shameful, disgraceful. There are 40,000 dead, 50,000 dead, 100,000 dead. We don't even know the exact number. And we're told that the Palestinian flag shouldn't be displayed here or there. That's pure intimidation of the population. They're Zionists, certainly, but they're also Islamophobic. The politicians, the journalists, the media, they're Islamophobic. We saw this recently in Amsterdam, for example. Everyone's talking about Amsterdam. Yes, hooligans came from a fascist country, a genocidal country, a country with apartheid. They came here and acted like fascists. All it took was to show a Palestinian flag, and it triggered these extreme reactions. His assessment certainly echoes what happened elsewhere, notably in Amsterdam, whose own right-wing government also acquiesced to Israel, condemned its own citizens. But not every politician thought that way, or thinks that way. And one in particular gave Israel and his own Dutch administration very short shrift in an emergency debate on the issue. Stefan van Baarle is leader of the left-wing Denk party in the Netherlands. Naturally, common sense coming from the left. But van Baarle wasn't there to just speak truth to power. He was there to tear a strip off it, and a full, almost 6-minute video of his eloquent destruction of Israeli conduct in Amsterdam and the government response to that is well worth watching in all of its, albeit subtitled, glory on my good friend Squawkbox's recent article entitled "Dutch Politician Tells Parliament Amsterdam Terrorised by Genocide Glorifiers, Israel Fans Riot in Paris." And indeed, that is exactly what van Baarle did. Because after he made clear how awful anti-Semitism is, and how Jewish people being targeted because of their identity is terrible and should not be tolerated, and that there is no place for hate in the Netherlands, he went for the jugular, saying, "It is proper that in the Netherlands we are having a discussion about discrimination and hate in our society. But this battle against discrimination, however, becomes weak when you selectively shop which types of discrimination you want to tackle. The debate loses credibility when forms of discrimination and hate are not acknowledged and downplayed, because in the last few days Amsterdam was terrorised by genocide glorifiers who thought like they, as some sort of colonists, could make Amsterdam unsafe. And these Maccabee thugs on genocide leave were able to riot nearly undisturbed. While the majority of Amsterdam feels the pain of the total destruction of Gaza and by the Dutch government-supported genocide, gangs of Maccabee thugs walked through the city and shouted, "F the Arabs, there is no school left in Gaza because there are no more kids." Racism and glorification of genocide while the police watched. 6 minutes, he went on an absolute legendary tirade. I strongly suggest you get yourself over to the Squawk Box, that article, and watch the whole thing in its entirety. What a pity the worst kind of politician are always the ones who seem to get into power, though, and not people like van Baarle. Instead, we have to put up with those who instead acquiesce and creep to Israel instead, like Dutch leader Dick Schoof, like Macron, Sarkozy, Hollande, Starmer, Lamy, and more. They can't speak out against Israel. They're either too weak or too bought and paid for. But then, given the root of all of this horrific conduct in Europe as football at the centre of it, where are UEFA and FIFA in all of this? Since October 7th, more than 344 of Palestine's own footballers have been killed, while Israeli football fans can go on the rampage and glorify genocide, as Stefan van Baarle puts it, and their team players can carry on playing without any form of censure. FIFA have been kicking into touch for months a decision on whether or not to ban Israel from football, given what is happening in Gaza. They made the decision to postpone making a ruling on this again just last month, now having kicked the matter into touch until next May, which is utterly unacceptable, craven, especially given in light of these most recent developments of football fans in Europe. UEFA were petitioned by the half-brother of King Abdullah of Jordan, of all people, back in February to boycott Israel in light of the war in Gaza, and they flat refused, stating the situation between Israel and Gaza was not the same as the case with Russia and their war in Ukraine, because of course Russia have been censored. Frankly, I beg to differ. The only difference is that on one side Western interests align with the oppressed and the other with the oppressor. And it seems UEFA follows suit and FIFA just seem too afraid to do what they know should be done. Sanctions against Israel for the atrocities they commit should be amongst the easiest to carry out, when it comes to sport especially. That sporting organisers and organisations are so frit to even do that is pathetic. Refusal to acknowledge a genocide is nothing new amongst politicians, though. Keir Starmer has just done so for the umpteenth time, to no surprise at all, in arguably the worst way he's ever done yet, though, as this week, with an unforgivable stance that shows not only has he still not moved on the matter of Israel and Gaza, but that no matter what Israel does, he's never going to move on that position either. Check out that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.